Okay. Just before we start, did someone else also hit recording? Okay, because we're going to be recording this meeting, just so everyone is aware. I want to welcome everybody. I'm Susan Latham. I'm the chair of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board. And I want to welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us today at the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board hearing on the 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan. The New York City Department of Sanitation released its draft 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan on October 1st, which provides the roadmap for how the Department of Sanitation will manage New York City's trash over the next 10 years. There is a mandatory period for public comment and feedback, which is the public's opportunity to weigh in on New York City's plan. However, the Department of Sanitation has provided only a 45-day review period, which is the minimum allowable under current guidelines, and does not really provide sufficient time to do the public outreach and education needed to inform the public about the plan and its impacts, and to collect public testimony and feedback. This means that all public comments must be submitted to the Department of Sanitation by November 17th. The testimony that is presented today will be submitted to the Department of Sanitation of New York City. It will also be used to help Queens SWAB and its partner SWABs in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Manhattan develop consolidated, unified testimony that will be presented to the New York City Council at its hearing, which we expect to be on November 13th. Today's hearing is an opportunity for the people of Queens to have public input into the plan. We look forward to hearing your thoughts about trash in Queens, its environmental impacts in your community, and what your suggestions are for concrete actions that the city can take to reduce waste, increase diversion from landfills and incineration, and deal with our trash in an environmentally sound and just way. We're going to hear from various stakeholders who have already registered, but want to welcome anyone to testify who hasn't registered. And I am including right now the registration link in the chat. And what we ask is that if you haven't registered, please register on that link so we have a record. And when we have a free moment, we will ask you to testify. I also want to ask people to please limit their testimony to 5 minutes. And the first person that I would like to call on to testify is William Scarborough. Welcome. And at the end of your testimony, if you haven't already done so, can you please address any potential solutions or specific actions that the city should take to address the issues that you've described in your testimony? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, members of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board. My name is William Scarborough, and I am president of the Southeast Queens Residents Environmental Justice Coalition. And I'm also the president of the Addesleigh Park Civic Organization. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Our community in Southeast Queens has been heavily impacted by the proliferation of waste transfer stations, which are in close proximity to residents' homes. This is particularly evident along Liberty Avenue between 165th Street and 180th Street in Jamaica, and on Hollis Avenue off of Jamaica Avenue. These facilities are all located in M1 zones where businesses are designed to coexist easily with residences that abut these zones. These waste transfer stations dealing in progressible waste and construction and demolition waste create noxious fumes and dangerous particulate matter, which has contributed to elevated levels of respiratory illnesses and other health hazards. The commercial waste zone and waste equity legislative initiatives are supposed to provide relief for our residents, but the issue has always been and remains the lack of effective enforcement of these and existing statutes by agencies such as the Department of Sanitation and New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. I would urge QSWAB to advocate for effective enforcement of these recent initiatives designed to protect residents from the negative impacts of close proximity to these waste transfer facilities. Any legislation is only as effective as the enforcement, and that has been sorely lacking over the years when it comes to the waste transfer stations in Jamaica, Queens. Additionally, we have issues of persistent illegal dumping, especially under the Long Island Railroad overpasses at Merrick Boulevard, 177th Street and 183rd Street between Liberty Avenue and Archer Avenue / 193rd Avenue. I would urge QSWAB to advocate for additional attention to these locations, including installing cameras under the overpasses to catch and punish dumpers. Thank you very much. So as I indicated in my remarks, there are legislative initiatives that have been put in place. The problem has always been the lack of enforcement. The commercial waste zone law, the waste equity, all of those require that the various agencies actually enforce them. And there have been regulations in the past that were supposed to allow waste transfer stations and other higher use group industries to coexist in M1 zones because they were supposed to adhere to certain performance standards. The problem is that the agencies that were supposed to enforce the performance standards don't do so. And so what you have is these industries that are acting in very derelict and noxious ways and have severely impacted the residents that are forced to live close to them. So my biggest issue really is the enforcement because I think as many laws as we put in place, if they're not enforced, they become ineffective. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next we have Ryan Castaglia.
Hello. Can you hear me? Great. My name is Ryan Castaglia. I'm Executive Director of Sure We Can, a Brooklyn-based redemption center and nonprofit serving independent recyclers or canners, the folks who collect and redeem the bottles and cans other people throw away. Many of our community members live in Queens, and so these issues absolutely directly pertain to them. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. A person only needs to glance at the news or look outside to understand the vast scope of the waste problem we face and the steep responsibility the city has in ensuring the safety, well-being, and success of its people in the daunting months to come. Urgent action needs to be taken to keep our communities from being buried underneath the overwhelming burdens of pollution and climate change, and that hard-fought and successful environmental and economic policy isn't lost because of regressive and short-term thinking. The consequences of inaction are evident. New Yorkers are in real danger of losing their lives or livelihoods. Small businesses and independent workers across the city are abandoning the work of the circular economy because their income, which in some cases is controlled by the law, is simply insufficient. You'd think this incredible urgency would translate into swift action, and yet the city struggles to support even the simplest, most effective, and longest-standing recycling system we have, the bottle bill, as well as the workers who drive its success. The bottle bill works, period. It's demonstrated its efficacy continuously for decades, resulting in the diversion of millions of tons of waste and vast reductions in litter in our communities. It's the most effective recycling system we have, resulting in all of that waste diversion, reduction in litter with no cost to the state. In fact, it generates revenue through unclaimed deposits. And today it captures around 70% of the material it covers. It supports small businesses, drives the circular economy. It's even a mechanism for environmental justice and creates a low barrier way for marginalized people from all kinds of backgrounds to become independent recyclers who work, contribute to their communities, and earn a livelihood. Professional canners are invested in their communities and return to the same places. And for this reason, they don't tend to leave a mess when they gather materials. I know recyclers who've sent their children to college, one bottle or can at a time. Our redemption center, just in one part of Brooklyn, diverts around 1 million bottles and cans a month and distributes hundreds of thousands of dollars annually in income into underserved communities. In a very basic way, the system makes our city cleaner and stronger. All of this is hopelessly out of sync with the neglect the system suffers. The deposit hasn't gone up for over 40 years, which means participation in the system is not properly incentivized. That means a lower return rate and poorer recycling outcomes. It also means the workers who pick up the bottles and cans others throw away haven't gotten a raise in decades. Today in the city, canners earn on average around $5 an hour, less than a third of minimum wage. The handling fee that supports redemption centers hasn't risen for 16 years, while the cost of operating those businesses has risen drastically. Those centers are closing every day because it's too expensive to operate. Vague and unenforced regulation has made accountability between redemption centers and distributors almost impossible. Finally, many types of containers are arbitrarily excluded from the system. It just doesn't make sense. All of these factors combine to hamper the system's efficacy and put more trash on the streets. After years of kicking the can down the road, the system's just on the brink of collapse. Redemption centers are disappearing. Marginalized canners are being further marginalized. And our streets, landfills, and waterways are filling with beverage containers that could otherwise be easily diverted. The first step to a better solution is the city must wholeheartedly support the state's expansion of the bottle bill. With 3 simple updates, the system could reach new heights. A 10-cent deposit would push our return rates from 70% to 90%, as well as provide more remuneration for the workers that efficacy depends on. An increased handling fee would allow more redemption centers to flourish instead of suffer. More containers included would mean a drastic increase in the volume of material diverted from our landfills and waterways. Though the bottle bill is a state law, the city's not powerless to improve conditions in order to set the system and the workers who participate in it up for success. Beyond advocating for the legislature to take action, the city can bolster the system in smaller ways. It could, for example, acknowledge the efficacy of the bottle bill by announcing through DSNY that beverage containers are more successfully diverted through deposit returns than the curbside mix. Containerization and rat mitigation are topics of huge concern, and rightfully so. Yet we see fast-moving pilot programs with minimal stakeholder inclusion rolled out in neighborhoods. And the shared characteristic of this program is the padlocks placed on these containers to keep workers out. Independent recyclers are not rats. And if they're prevented from accessing recyclables, it impacts not only their and their families' livelihoods, but also the city's efficiency at diverting that waste. If the paralysis around this issue continues, all New Yorkers' lives will continue to be severely impacted. The communities will be more littered, their waterways more polluted, and their income hampered. We're not talking about reinventing the wheel. This system works, and it works very well. It simply needs to be updated to a contemporary standard and supported by its stakeholders. New York City can't afford to take it for granted any longer. Thank you. I'll just pull out, I guess, the calls to action, which are first that the city, though the council has taken steps to resolve in favor of the state bill, the city executive administration has not been supportive. So we need to get a full spectrum New York City supporting the bottle bill message out to the state. Next, these issues around containerization need to be addressed. The folks who depend most on accessing that material and again, drive the system that allows that material to be successfully recycled and captured are being excluded by containerization models that lock up that material and prevent their access. That not only impacts their livelihoods, but makes it less likely that material going into those containers actually gets constructively recycled. Canners should be included as stakeholders in that conversation to make sure not only their needs, but also the city's efficiency is represented at that table. I could talk also about, like, again, the DSNY should announce publicly that the system is valuable and should be participated in. It shouldn't be regarded as a competing system when the scope of the waste crisis is so vast that we absolutely need all solutions supported and entertained. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Next, we have Barbara DeYoung-Izel. And Barbara, you are still muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for having me. Okay, I am the president of the Octagon Neighborhood Association in St. Albans, and I'm also a member of South Queens Resident Environmental Justice Coalition, SCOURGE, with Mr. Scarborough. And I'm advocating today for my community about the garbage dumping and the sanitation problems that we have in our area. So we continue to report dumping has a permanent job for some and an eyesore for others. that live in our community. What can be done about it? Why illegal garbage cannot be picked up on like the regular garbage routes on certain days of the week that the sanitation come through. There's dumping on some of the routes, but just like they see it, just like we see it, I'm sorry, they see it. We don't understand why the sanitation can't pick up the garbage that they see dumped on particular garbage routes. A lot of their excuses is that it's not in front of an address, so they can't pick it up. So when we go to complain about the dumping, especially under the Long Island Railroad, which is on 120th Avenue between 180th Street and Farmers Boulevard, they tell us it has to be a bathtub size before it's reported. That's a lot of garbage, a bathtub size. So we would like to know why they can't pick it up on the garbage route on the days of pickup. Why do we always have to wait until it turns into a pile of dumping garbage, a bathtub size? I don't think that's fair. The other thing is that the turnaround time when you file a complaint with 311, for instance, there's a vacant lot in our area where there's a lot of dumping, as well as trucks, broken down trucks that are sitting on it. The property actually belongs to the city of New York. And we filed a complaint last year, March 2025. They told us that it would take 75 days before they could even get to it. And as of 2 days ago, nothing has been done. So even with their turnaround time, they don't seem to address the issue. So what we would like to add as a solution is that you have the sanitation enforcement that rides around in cars, but I only see them giving summonses to maybe residential areas. I don't understand why they can't report some of the dumping that they see on the street, because actually sometimes some of that garbage flows down to the sewers that causes a flooding problem. So why can't they clean that up as well? And why can't cameras be enforced in some of these areas where there's a lot of dumping, like under the railroad and on certain streets where it's really a famous place for dumping? And I understand that some people are even paid to go dump from these construction companies in the area. So we're concerned about that. We like a beautiful neighborhood too, and we're trying to keep it nice, but we can't if we don't have help, at least from the sanitation department. Thank you for listening to my testimony.
Thank you, Barbara. Next, we have Mark Laster.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, my name is Mark Laster, and I am co-chair of the Forest Hills Green Team, third vice chair of Queens Community Board number 6, and alumni of the Queensborough President Donovan Richards Queens General Assembly, and a licensed clinical social worker with over 45 years of experience. The comments I'm making reflect my own personal observations and do not represent any positions of the multiple civic organizations I'm involved with. In May of 2021, when the food SWAB drop-off site run by Grow NYC was still shut down due to the pandemic, we contacted Chelsea Ekabenian, who is working for the Queens Botanical Gardens, to set up a volunteer-run food SWAB drop-off site in McDonald Park. We were seeing an average of 300 people coming to drop off their food scraps. The food scraps were then hauled by big reuse to Queens Botanical Gardens for composting. I'm attaching a picture of our initial group of volunteers, which I attached to the testimony. When Grow NYC reopened their site in December of 2021 in McDonald Park, again, thanks to Chelsea, we partnered with Common Point Queens and opened up a site by their location in April of 2022. From April 2022 to May 2024, we maintained this totally volunteer-run site, never missing a week except for holidays. When Mayor Adams cut the budget for community composting, we were forced to shut down our site since there was no funding for big reuse to haul the food scraps we collected. In addition to collecting food scraps, we also did a great deal of both environmental and civic education. We distributed masks and hand sanitizers as we emerged from the pandemic. We distributed small bins to people to collect their food scraps. We distributed information about primary and general upcoming elections. We also distributed literature about the importance of composting, explaining what community composting is and why it is necessary. We even hosted a very successful participatory budgeting voting event that was sponsored by our local council member, Lynn Schulman. Running this site also gave us an opportunity to talk to members of our community. When we were running our site in McDonald Park, a fifth grade student approached us and asked if we could do a presentation at his school about climate change. This one small contact led us to reach out to local schools to do these presentations. We have done presentations at Mel's High School, Archbishop Malloy High School, Forest Hills High School, PS 174, Halsey General Junior High School. We continue to reach out to schools to do these presentations. Aside from this, running a weekly activity had helped to build a camaraderie among members of the Forest Hills Green Team that I think has been lost since we were forced to shut down. We also would get inquiries from students to secure their necessary community credits. Without this regular weekly activity, it's challenging to provide opportunities for students to get these credits. Since our forced shutdown, I've attempted to have our site reopen. One concept I came up with is microhauling in our community. There are community activists who I met with, and they organize weekly bike rides around Flushing Meadow Corona Park. I shared with them the concept of microhauling, and they expressed interest in doing this. I have made numerous attempts to learn about the opportunities and challenges of microhauling, and have discovered resources to support them are few and far between. As we think about how to better manage our compostable waste, microhauling could provide us with a low-cost, environmentally friendly way to get food scraps to locations where they could be composted. I strongly encourage resources to be provided in our proposed solid waste management plan to help us grow our ability to microhaul. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we have DeeAnn Gorman.
Hi, thank you. Not sure I have a lot of solutions, but I have some notes. I've lived 25 years on the same street in Astoria, Queens, and have been walking my blocks, picking up trash on the street, attempted daily when I can. Garbage, trash blows down the street with the spring blossoms and fall leaves. How depressing. Garbage is a part of the New York City landscape. It is everywhere, on the sidewalk, in the gutters with the rain, clogging the street drains, then into our waterways. I see it in birds' nests everywhere. Some notes I've made from that and my experience with environmental groups like Beyond Plastics Queens. I'm also a public member of Community Board 1's Environmental Sanitation Committee. These are my personal comments. Businesses not keeping their public areas and sidewalks clean. We want to support community, especially small businesses, but I see many in Astoria not keeping the space outside their shops clean. It's stipulated online that sidewalk and tree pits are to be kept clean, but for example, along 30th and 31st Avenues in Astoria near me, and many other places in this community, that is not the case, especially as regards smokers. Outside ashtrays should be mandatory at restaurants and bars. The discarding of cigarettes in tree beds, the sidewalk and gutters prohibited. Burn bans have been affected these past years, and discarding cigarettes into leaves, trash piles, and waste in the street is not only unsightly, it's dangerous. Construction sites, many are not maintained, and garbage, food, rats, both living and dead sometimes, collect in the barriers out on the street, against the wooden fences, and around the premises. Education and training. A lot of what I see, at least residentially, may stem from ignorance. I've yet to see plastic and/or paper recycling and composting done correctly at my apartment building, for example. People routinely put stretchable plastics into the rigid bins, food in plastic non-compostable bags into the compost bin, etc. Besides needing to reduce the flow of items, example, single-use plastics, Better training needs to be continually evaluated and offered. Superintendents sometimes even leaf blow their sidewalks into the street, sending waste along with the leaves and dust, dirt, animal droppings into the faces of passersby. Plastic waste, straws, bottles and tops, cigarette butts, chewing gum, wipes. Plastic is in it all, discarded in our waste, spilled into our streets, and microplastics are now found in our bodies and bloodstreams. Plastic never goes away. More legislation against single-use plastics should be enacted and businesses urged to find alternatives. Big plastics is a big business and so hard to fight. We've got to do more and better. Special pickups or places to dispose of hard to dispose of items like clothing, electronics, stretchable plastics should be made more available. Right now, I personally collect those items and get them to safe disposal events, old clothing to H&M, for example. Micro and other plastics I pay to send to TerraCycle, but not everyone has the time and money to do this. So neighborhoods need to have better sites to take these items. Flimsy public trash cans, if there can be any trash cans found, especially, again, I'm going to mention 30th and 31st Avenues. If we want people to dispose of their trash properly, proper receptacles should be offered and regularly serviced. I report these issues to 311 and the appropriate agencies when I can, but trash, garbage, its creation and what becomes of it or what doesn't become of it needs to be a top and continual city priority. Thank you so much for your time and your work.
Thank you, DeeAnn. And I want to ask you and everyone else who has testified so far, if you haven't already done so, to please email your testimony to queenswabnyc@gmail.com so that we can just make sure we're recording this, but it would be great to have your written testimony as well. Is there anyone who's on here right now who has not registered who would like to testify?
Hi, Sue. It's Melissa. And I thought I registered, but I'm not sure if I did. Am I on your list or should I register using the link now?
Why don't you give your testimony and then if you just register on the link so that we have the running list of everyone who's testified. And then if you can just email me your testimony, that would be great.
Okay.
Melissa.
Okay, so should I go now?
Yeah, why don't you testify now? And then you can register later on is fine.
Okay. So thank you to Queens Solid Waste Advisory Committee and to everyone in attendance. I'm here as a representative of JH Scraps, and we're a community composting center operating in Jackson Heights. We've been in operation for about 13 years now. We're working in partnership with the Jackson Heights Beautification Group, which is our parent organization. We're an all-volunteer run group, and we operate in support of the city's program. We collect scraps from neighborhood residents to produce compost on site, and in this way, we help promote healthier soils in our areas. We use our compost at our site, and we also use it around the neighborhood street gardens as well as the open public places. We do this to improve the soils of our public gardens. Composting helps soils become better at absorbing and preserving moisture, in addition to enhancing the organisms and nutrients in depleted urban soils. This ability to absorb water is especially necessary now that we have cycles of drought punctuated by ever more powerful storms. These harsher storms can create runoff that complicates capture for our antiquated sewer system, usually making it so difficult for our system to manage that runoff. Can regularly pollute our nearby beaches. More absorbent soils help capture stormwater, lessening the pressure on our combined sewer system. We would like to urge QSWAB to advocate for support for composting and adequate budget for the municipal program. Community composting groups have so far diverted much organic waste, which is a critical component of the domestic waste output from landfills, where decomposition poses a problem to landfill management, producing leachate, which can contaminate surrounding waterways. Instead of posing problems by producing further harmful side effects, organic waste can be put to actual good use. It can truly be recycled and reused for healthier habitats for us and for decomposers, as well as for a broader spectrum of urban wildlife. The composting community, along with urban gardeners, have much to offer discussions of waste reduction, sustainability, and resilience. Composters and gardeners can help find innovative and simple ways to curtail waste and lessen the negative environmental impacts on our city. At the very least, we can all help advance better understanding of what is compostable and what can bolster the city's program, if not actually close loops locally, as Scraps is able to do. We want to support communities across the city by wasting less and by composting more for healthier soils and for richer microbiomes. So thank you for giving us and our group the opportunity to speak.
Melissa, thank you so much. Is there anyone else who has not registered who would like to speak? Then I am going to call on Mary Arnold. Mary, if you're ready to testify.
Thank you. My name is Mary Arnold. I'm here today speaking as a board member of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions, known as CURES. For New York City's 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan, DSNY and its consultant, Inch and Meter, have tweaked New York City's largely privatized export to disposal, quote, mature waste management system and infrastructure, end quote. The system was devised more than a quarter century ago when Fresh Kills was about to close. This system is proven to cause grave health and environmental harms and enrich companies invested in disposal assets while missing opportunities to enrich New York City's physical, economic, and social environments and lift burdens off communities currently on the receiving end of New York City's trash. The city's draft 2026 SWAB must be revised to focus on enactment of zero waste alternatives within New York City, such as source separating and locally composting organics at scale in every borough, instead of exporting organics as waste by rail to dispose in landfills and incinerators or in PFAS-laden sewage sludge. New York City has proved over the past 15 years that changing waste export transportation modes from truck to rail and barge won't achieve the mandates of New York City's zero waste laws. Waste export by rail and barge to landfilling and incineration under long-term contracts with companies invested in disposal assets doesn't reduce the tonnage or toxicity of waste or the externalization of health and environmental harms during waste processing, transport, and disposal. You may have heard that using trains instead of trucks for waste export gets trucks off the road. However, the use of trains instead of trucks does not reduce local truck traffic going to and from waste transfer stations to drop off waste like those in Southeast Queens. Every community that hosts a transfer station has this local truck traffic, regardless of the transportation mode used to export the waste from the city. The use of trains also does not reduce trucks at some disposal facilities. For example, the Reworld incinerator in Chester, Pennsylvania. 800 to 1,000 trucks a day dump waste at the Reworld incinerator. The waste includes organics and plastics thrown into black bag trash in Manhattan. The majority of Manhattan's waste is exported by rail from New York before being transferred to trucks that dump it at the Reworld incinerator. Now I'm going to describe to you some of the health and environmental harms that are being dumped on Queens residents by companies profiting from waste export by rail. The 1970s locomotive technology that is generally being used to haul freight rail in New York is actually a source of pollution. These old locomotives pollute the air our families breathe with thousands of times more pollution than locomotives that meet Tier 4 emission standards, which has been the US EPA standard for locomotives since 2015. However, the way current EPA regulations are written has allowed railroads to keep using old locomotives. There are a few locomotives that do meet the current standards. The Port Authority of New York, New Jersey repowered 3 Tier 0 rail freight locomotives working in Greenville Yard in 2015. There is 1 Tier 4 freight locomotive hauling waste in New York City, the one Waste Management purchased in 2018 for picking up and hauling away waste from Varick and Review Avenue transfer stations. The modern engines in these Tier 4 locomotives are quieter, as well as being zero emissions. However, it takes more than one locomotive to haul a train. Here is a typical complaint about toxic diesel emissions and noise from old locomotives that a Queens resident sent to Cures just last week. Quote, "Can you do something about the train that slams its brakes near Fresh Pond Road train yard? It causes houses to shake and sound is deafening at this late at night. It really is upsetting. When it breaks, it causes the entire block to shake. It's getting worse and worse. Our whole block is suffering. They park the train cars there and it smells terrible, like diesel fuel. They constantly leave the train running. The train is also very loud at times of the day, even up until 10 p.m. My mom cannot even open her window because of the smell." The response from the Long Island Railroad's freight rail concessionaire, the New York and Atlantic Railway, was that what was heard were just the sounds of normal switching activity coming from 3 separate trains, 2 of which were operating at the same time. Toxic fumes and nighttime noise from waste by rail are health hazards in Queens because locomotives operate in and near residential areas. There is only one 10-acre rail yard where all the rail freight coming on and off Long Island is switched, and it's located in Glendale, Queens. So rail cars are stored on tracks in neighborhoods. As Department of Sanitation of New York correctly points out in the draft SWAB, the IBX, if it's built, will cut down on tracks available to freight rail, including on the Bay Ridge line, where some rail cars are stored today. Rail cars are 65 to 75 feet long. If the IBX takes a track on the Bay Ridge, that will mean even more cars will be stored on tracks in neighborhoods. And when they are moved, including at night, the problems just described will adversely impact residents.
Hey, Mary.
Yes.
So you've used up your 5-minute slot.
Okay.
But you know what? It's great testimony. So can we can give you another 5-minute slot is fine. And then
Okay.
we'll get to you as soon as Mary's done. Okay.
Okay. Or I could defer to the next speaker and then continue.
The next speakers are not here yet.
Oh, okay.
So we've got time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Department of Sanitation of New York points to the massive and growing amount of construction and demolition debris known as C&D that is being exported from New York City. More than a third of the New York and Atlantic Railway's freight business on Long Island in Queens and Brooklyn is municipal solid waste and C&D. As DSNY points out, the C&D that is being hauled is industrial waste, and it is presumed to contain toxics. State law requires that C&D must be tested before it can be reused instead of being landfilled. Yet every day in New York City, open-top rail cars of C&D that also have drains in the bottoms of the cars emit waste blow-off, leachate, and gas in residential areas. Chapter 5, page 165 mentions transportation requirement exemptions for C&D, with no acknowledgement that New York state law now mandates containment of waste by rail, including for C&D. The law was passed and then signed by Governor Hochul in 2023. The law amended Subdivision 2 of Section 27-0712 of the Environmental Conservation Law. However, waste disposal companies are still shipping and railroads are still hauling toxic loads of C&D without solid covers in defiance of the law. The American Association of Railroads, American Shortline and Regional Railroad Association, and the National Waste and Recycling Organization, New York State Chapter, sued New York State in federal court to overturn the modest protection of containing waste in rail cars that the new law provides. There is no federal protection since this waste is federally classified as non-hazardous. Before New York State's waste containment law, it was the railroads themselves, the top loading committee of the American Association of Railroads, that could decide how the waste would be hauled. The railroads decided that pervious orange netting was sufficient covering for C&D that is dumped and crushed in a rail car. This case is scheduled to be heard in the Southern District of New York in 2026. Even though residents have been protesting against hauling waste in open rail cars since this new waste by rail industry started in 2008, one of the industry's arguments in the federal court case is that the open rail cars covered by netting is the quote unquote industry standard. Communities are on the receiving end of this business, which is so attractive that on Long Island, Swedish and Australian companies have bought into it, along with their international investors. As one resident living near a landfill told Cures within the past 2 weeks, quote, "The cars sometimes sit near homes for days before getting unloaded. There are rats and other rodents that get into the cars. Incinerator ash is released in the air as it is dumped out of rail cars. Dust from industrial waste is everywhere. We are getting 9,500 to 12,000 tons a day dumped on our community, and there's no way to inspect all of that. Our water source is way too close to these mountains of ash. People are being pushed out of their homes and forced to sell generational farms. It's so sad. Waste by rail is destroying every community it touches." End of quote. Shipping C&D away, quote unquote, from New York City has become a quote unquote cost-effective method of waste management only because such health and environmental costs are not being counted. Ending these unjust community subsidies also supports implementation of sustainable zero waste practices for reducing and managing this waste. In the case of C&D, Department of Sanitation of New York's draft SWAB mentions zero waste practices such as deconstruction and more recycling, for example, of gypsum wallboard construction debris, which is the source of toxic hydrogen sulfide gas at landfills. Here are some other solutions to today's problems. 1, enact strict testing for hazmat and radiation monitoring before C&D by rail leaves New York, instead of only visual inspections. 2, enact stricter regulations for tracking what is in C&D. Since the waste is crushed or shredded, it's unrecognizable. DSNY points this out and says there's insufficient data on this waste. 3, cover rail cars with the realization that shipping industrial waste like C&D, automotive waste, and incinerator ash is not safe in leaking cars exposed to rain, snow, and wind. 4, ban industrial waste from municipal solid waste landfills. Industrial waste should be going to a hazardous waste landfill that is specifically permitted for C&D, incinerator ash, and other industrial waste. Problems for residents by landfills include that when construction debris is mixed with normal household trash and moisture, it creates noxious gases. There's also the problem of resulting groundwater contamination, including from PFAS, that requires costly remediation, as at the Brookhaven landfill and surrounding residential communities. Landfill leachate containing toxics from industrial waste dumped in landfills is not typically treated on site by the disposal company, but is piped or trucked to municipal sewage treatment plants. The resulting effluent enters waterways, and the resulting sludge is contaminated with PFAS and other toxics. The sludge is spread on land, including farmland, or incinerated or landfilled. Towns and counties in New York, upstate New York, and also Orange County now, and other states have moratoria on land spreading of sewage sludge or have banned it. Maine has a state ban because of adverse impacts from PFAS on agriculture. New York and other states are considering bans or moratoria. Maine shut down a Casella facility that made sewage sludge into products for land spreading because the facility was contaminated with PFAS. Recent science shows that plants uptake PFAS, including into some edible crops. And yet, DSNY's draft says that in the next 10 years, almost all of New York City's sewage sludge from its wharfs will be spread on land. 5, commingling of waste streams, such as mixing MSW with specialty waste, should be banned. This mixing may dilute the hazardous material and get it below the legal definition of hazardous waste. If hazardous waste is cocktailed in with other shredded and crushed waste in large rail cars, it may not test above the ppm limit and passes inspection. Waste disposal companies can avoid the high cost of using a hazardous waste landfill by mixing it in with regular waste. As the resident by the landfill told Cures, quote, "We were told that PCB and heavy metals such as lead and arsenic were hazardous and banned from the landfill. Then they shipped in 456,000 tons of contaminated soil, that had PCB, lead, arsenic, and other hazardous chemicals. It was allowed because it was diluted with dirt. It doesn't make any sense. They're supposed to follow best management practices, and one listed to prevent hazmat spread is to separate different waste streams. They don't do it because they make more money on quote unquote specialty waste, and they don't live anywhere near the dumping site. It's all about profit when landfills are owned by foreign investment companies. They just mix industrial and residual waste in with MSW and no one knows it's there. They target poor rural areas like ours that are unzoned and near railroads. So the legal definition of hazardous above a certain ppm provides the loophole, end quote. And finally, to conclude, Department of Sanitation of New York can't shut its eyes to the health and environmental costs its current corporatized waste export to disposal system is dumping on residents and the environment, and neither should the residents of New York City. This draft swamp needs to be written to move New York City away from this 25-year-old system and redirect resources to an alternative zero waste system, infrastructure, outreach, education, and enforcement within New York City. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we have Lou Reyes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reyes. I am the Compost Project Manager at Queens Botanical Garden. Compost Project Manager at Botanical Garden. I want to address the fact that community composting is small and inefficient. That the brown bins, that the young bins, and community composting FSCOs are all the same, and none of that can be further from the truth. When community composting got defunded towards the end of 2023, the budget director for the mayor's office testified several times and did not back down that community composting is small and inefficient. And then DSNY has branded all the brown bins, all the smart bins as composting bins. And we need to be very careful about that, because we need to understand what composting is. Composting doesn't mean separating your food waste. Composting means creating a soil amendment, which is what we do here at Queens Botanical Garden, which is what Earth Matter is doing, which is what so many organizations are doing at a smaller scale. That is composting. We need more composting facilities, not less. We lost a phenomenal site in Long Island City, Big Reuse, because we don't have a system in place to support this to support these composting sites. So we lost a mid-scale site, and we are down to 2 mid-scale sites in New York City. One of them is in Governor's Island, and the other one is here at Queens Botanical Garden. I would like for us to have at least one site in every borough. And that is why I and Queens Botanical Garden, we are big supporters of local law 696-2024, introduced by council member Sandy Nurse, that when put into place, it would mean that they have at least one person site in every borough. Because let's face it, we every day, and I want everyone here on this call to take this, to have this as a takeaway. Tons of waste on a daily basis. I'm sorry, not tons, pounds. That would be a lot. But we produce 44 million pounds of waste. That is residential and commercial waste, and we are not handling our waste at all. We have this approach of it, of getting rid of it and then forgetting about it. And we really need to be hyper focused on how we are recycling our organics. Currently, when they introduce our waste into the brown bin or the smart bins, they go to Newtown Creek. So they go to Newtown Creek, which is a biodigester. DSNY will say, well, that's better than DSNY. If you tell me that that's better than, I will tell you, but it's not as good as community composting. Community composting is the gold standard. It's the gold city deserves the gold standard. We should not be putting our food scraps in a bin that is going to be taken to Newtown Creek, where it's actually transported to Ohio. That's where the landfill for the slurry is. That's where the landfill for the slurry is. Highly inefficient, and we're still creating a lot of methane through that. The advantage of composting, really, like, if anyone wants to come on composting, if anyone come on to Queens Botanical Garden and take one of our master composter workshops, really simple is to reduce methane emissions, because when methane emissions are considerably worse than carbon dioxide by 28 to and after 20 years, it's about 86 times worse. So it actually gets worse with time. So we need to be very, very conscientious of that. So I am in full solidarity with all the community sites that are still processing, with sites that have lost their, or with organizations that have lost their sites. And I want DSNY to be more aware of the importance of community composting. We are small because of our funding, but we are far from inefficient. We close the gap where DSNY hasn't been able to service. We are there. And very quickly, as I brought this up, I want everyone to think about micro haulers like the hot boxes in Harlem, groups that are like incredibly important to this ecosystem. And if we're actually going to reduce our waste considerably, it's really going to start with composting. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lou. And to close out our hour, I have some testimony that was submitted that we were asked to read. And let me just get that. Sorry, a little technical difficulty here. Okay, I am not finding it right now, and so instead, I'm going to read my testimony. I'm Susan Latham, and I am a resident of Jackson Heights. I am the chair of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board. While tabling for events for QSWAB, I have spoken to many residents of Queens regarding their concerns for how their trash is handled. A few concerns come up repeatedly. First, many residents of apartment or other multi-unit residences complain that their building does not comply with the curbside organics collection law. Their building either doesn't provide a bin for them to deposit their organics, or the bin they provide is insufficient to contain all of the organic scraps collected. Second, people don't separate their organic scraps because they don't have space to store organic scraps, or they complain that the organics will smell after sitting around for a week and ask why New York City doesn't pick them up more frequently. Third, those buildings that do provide a bin complain that their brown bin often gets missed by the Department of Sanitation during collections, and they have to hold on to their full bin for another week with no place to store new organic scraps until the next pickup. This seems to occur most frequently with the first or last building on a block. It's happened to my building repeatedly. Considering that organic materials make up an estimated 35 to 40% of municipal trash, and that recyclable materials make up an estimated 32% of municipal trash, or in total, this is about 70% of the total waste stream, I don't understand why the Department of Sanitation doesn't flip its current collection schedule. Instead of collecting black bag trash 2 times a week and recyclables and organics 1 time a week, why not reverse it? Collect recyclables and organics 2 times a week and black bag trash 1 time a week. The Department of Sanitation is already making 2 pickups per week, and it already has the dual sanitation trucks needed to make this possible in its fleet. This would solve the storage issue that many buildings have, and it would help change behavior. As I said, I live in Jackson Heights, which is a dense neighborhood filled with multi-unit buildings. When I walk around my neighborhood the night before scheduled trash pickups, the recyclables and brown bins on the curb far outnumber the black bags of trash. My multi-unit building produces and separates far more recyclables and organics than it does regular trash, which we then have to store for a week before the next pickup. It really doesn't make sense. A concerted outreach and education effort should be conducted to reach those buildings and single-family homes that are not currently separating their organics or their paper, cardboard, metal, glass, and plastic. And this should be coupled with enforcement so that buildings that do not comply get warnings and eventually fines. These efforts would go a long way to helping achieve New York City's zero waste plan. Local Law 87 of 2023 requires the Department of Sanitation to create a zero waste plan and to increase waste diversion from landfill and incineration through waste reduction, reuse, and recycling, with a goal of diverting all recyclable and organic waste by 2030. However, I don't see many concrete actions to achieve zero waste in the draft 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan. Doubling the Department of Sanitation's pickups of organics and recyclable materials to 2 times per week, coupled with outreach, education, and enforcement, would help to divert almost 70% of our trash from landfill and incineration. We all know that sending our trash by truck and rail to other municipalities to be incinerated or dumped in a landfill is not environmentally sustainable, it is not cost-effective, it is not a viable long-term solution, and most importantly, it is not healthy for the residents of the communities that are having to deal with our garbage. The 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan should include these simple recommendations: double the organic and recycled materials pickup to 2 times per week, educate buildings and residents about these laws that already exist, and enforce them. Thank you. And we are now at the top of 5 o'clock. We have several people who have registered to testify between 5 and 6. And so before we get to that, what I'd like to do is I would like to first welcome everyone. I'm Susan Latham. I'm chair of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board. And I want to thank you for joining us today for the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board hearing on the 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan. The New York City Department of Sanitation released its draft 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan on October 1st, which provides the roadmap for how the Department of Sanitation will manage New York City's trash over the next 10 years. There is a mandatory period for public comment and feedback, which is the public's opportunity to weigh in on New York City's plan. However, the Department of Sanitation has provided only a 45-day review period, which is the minimum allowable under current guidelines, and does not really provide sufficient time to do the public outreach and education needed to inform the public about the plan and its impacts, and to collect public testimony and feedback. This means that all public comments must be submitted to the Department of Sanitation by November 17th. The testimony that is presented today will be submitted to the Department of Sanitation. It will also be used to help Queens SWAB and its partner SWABs in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Manhattan develop consolidated, unified testimony that will be presented to the New York City Council at its hearing, which we expect to be on November 13th. Today's hearing is an opportunity for the people of Queens to have public input into the plan. We look forward to hearing your thoughts about trash in Queens, its environmental impacts in your community, and what your suggestions are for concrete actions that the city can take to reduce waste, increase diversion from landfill and incineration, and deal with our trash in an environmentally sound and just way. We're going to hear from various stakeholders who have already registered but want to welcome anyone to testify who hasn't registered. And I will put the registration link in the chat. We just ask you to register so that we have a record of your name and information. And when we have a free moment, we will ask you to testify. Please, if possible, limit your testimony to 5 minutes. And I would like to call on Zulene Mayfield. Zulene, are you ready to testify?
I can. I can.
Great, thank you.
I'm on my phone, so you all pay me no mind. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eileen Mayfield, and I am from the city of Chester, Pennsylvania. I am the chairperson of Chester Residents Concerned for Quality Living, or we like to be called Circle. Circle was formed in 1992 as a direct result of what we were told was a trash to steam plant being built and beginning its operations in 1991. We quickly learned that in actuality, it was nothing more than an incinerator. So we formed on everything that you could see, hear, and smell. We had no idea of the pollution that had landed literally on top of us. Chester, PA is the oldest city in Pennsylvania. William Penn landed here in 1681. Chester was once an economic hub and the center of manufacturing, shipbuilding, and heavy industry. Chester built the wealth of Delaware County, of which it sits in. Chester suffered, like most industrial cities, with industry closing and moving to the suburbs, resulting in a loss of residents and our economic stability. Just 15 miles outside of Philadelphia, 5 minutes from both New Jersey and Delaware, 35,000 people reside within Chester's 5 miles. So we are a very densely populated community. Much of Chester, some 3.9 miles, sits on waterfront on the Delaware River. In Chester, 70% of our residents are African Americans, and the median income is roughly about $39,000. In 1995, Dr. Charles Lee, United Church of Christ, labeled Chester as one of the worst cases of environmental racism that he had ever seen. In 1992, the incinerator, managed at the time by Westinghouse, was the nation's 4th largest incinerator, burning 2,688 tons of trash per day. Today, it is owned by Covanta Reworld, and it is the largest incinerator in the nation, burning 3,550 tons of trash per day. They operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they burn about 1.3 million tons of garbage every year. Philadelphia contributes about 30% of the trash being burned, or a little over 400,000 tons of trash per year. And additionally, New York sends about 27 to 29% of its volume, 375,000 tons. And Delaware County contributes about 27% of the volume that is burnt. Incidentally, the city of Chester only contributes about 1.8% of the waste that is burned. Manhattan sends about 65,000 tons, and Queens sends about 431,000 tons per year to Chester. By way of rail, it goes to Delaware and then it's loaded onto trucks and trucked throughout our community. Anyway, resulting in about 500 to 800 tons, 800 trucks per day. In Pennsylvania, the Covanta Reworld, by statute, must have a community host agreement and pays community host fees to the city of Chester. They were paying $2.50 a ton to Chester, resulting in about $4 to $5 million to the general budget. Then magically in 2017, the former mayor, Kirkland, signed a secret contract with Covanta, lowering that fee to $2 a ton, resulting in a loss of revenue of about $14 million. There's been no explanation why the fee was lowered or why it was done in secrecy. The Covanta Reworld incinerator leads in Delaware County as the #1 polluter in nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, and mercury. It is #2 in releases of lead, fine particulate matter 2.5, sulfur dioxide, cadmium, chromium, and arsenic, which are all known carcinogens. The VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, are all contributors to climate destruction. But we know of the human destruction. Over 27% of our children have asthma. We have a high infant mortality and low birth weight baby rates. Cancer rates higher than the national average. For example, liver and bile cancers are 91% higher than the national average. Laryngeal cancer, 84% higher. Hodgkin's lymphoma, 78% higher. Pancreatic cancer, 50% higher. All higher than the national average, and it goes on and on and on. Recently, Circle lost a member, Mr. Joshua Shockley. He was 38 years old. He died from a rare form of cancer. The day of his first chemotherapy was the day that his son was born. His son was 5 months old and he died, and he's gone forever. Covanta Reworld is an outdated facility in terms of its pollution control technology. It was built over 33 years ago. It lacks modern pollution control technology. The plant will say that they operate within its permit limits. We say that they are grandfathered in and would not be able to meet today's clean air quality standards. Delaware and Philadelphia County and the region of which Chester sits in, we are in what is called the non-attainment area of the Clean Air Act standard for ground level ozone, meaning that we have our air quality is consistently unhealthy to breathe. In 2024, the American Lung Association issued its State of the Air report and gave Delco a failing grade for annual particulate pollution. Environmental exposures to particulate matter 2.5, toxic air emissions, and diesel particulate matter. Chester also falls within the 90th percentile for ozone, meaning it is in the top 10% in the state for ground level ozone exposure, which is known to cause respiratory distress among other health problems. The facility is a major stationary source for greenhouse gas emissions, resulting in climate degradation. Additionally, the Covanta Reworld incinerator is located on the waterfront in Chester. It has become a real impediment to true economic development of our waterfront for our city. They have caused the devaluation of properties and lowered the quality of life in our community. People no longer sit on their porches, no longer have barbecues, or are embarrassed to have company come over due to the stench coming from the incinerator. The community surrounding the incinerator went from an 81% owner-occupied housing rate, and it is now below 40% owner-occupied. Our community has been transformed into majority rental units. Many homeowners basically walked away from their properties that you could not sell or rent. I was one of those homeowners, and my old house still sits empty. Circle was able to convince the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority to conduct a life cycle analysis of trash that it sent to be burned. Some of the findings concluded that incineration in the city of Chester has led to $193 million more in human health and environmental costs per ton of waste disposed than that of directly landfilling it in the landfill. When looking at human health costs alone, incineration was 23 times worse than landfilling. The transportation impacts of landfilling in Berks, rather than using the in-county incinerator, were insignificant compared to other health and environmental impacts, and did not therefore justify choosing incineration. If the county were to achieve true zero waste with diversion of 522,000 tons of waste to recycling and composting to year, with zero landfilling or incineration, it would avoid approximately 703,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. According to the EPA, the avoidance of emissions would have the same climate benefit of removing 142,000 gas-powered passenger vehicles from the road each year in Delaware County. So what do we do, and why am I here today? I am here to be the face of when someone puts their trash out for disposal. I am a representative of our community, and I can tell you that our community is suffering. People are dying from cancer, all types of cancer. People are dying and are being impacted with diabetes, cardiovascular disease, heart disease, and other just nuisance issues. Every single day, we are environmentally assaulted. And if I were to insult somebody physically, would have the ability to go and file and press charges against me, and I would be held accountable for my actions. Because this incinerator, no one is ever charged with the damage that they have done to our community. And the human cost, the loss of life, the loss of quality of life issues. Nobody accounts for a child having an asthma attack and it cannot be controlled at the school or wherever they are, and they have to go to the ER. Then that requires a parent to come off of their job. Then you are faced with, okay, this is the third time in a year. So either you go to the hospital or you don't. If you don't go, then you could be charged with medical neglect for your child. And if you do go, your boss has told you if you leave, you won't have a job. Those are the things that people in our community are faced with. So what do? We advocate for mandatory recycling and community-wide composting, removing the organics from the waste stream. Have your community conduct a life cycle analysis of waste incineration versus landfilling. It will determine that landfilling is cheaper and less polluting than incineration. Come up with an ordinance, if you don't have it, that encourages salvaging and recycling of construction and demolition materials from the waste stream. Divert your trash from incineration and stop sending trash to Chester. For 33 years, Circle has been the Calvary for this and many other communities, nationally and internationally, doing our best to safeguard our community. We are asking for a little help from New York. We've shouldered this thing. We cannot do this alone. It will take a collaborative effort to change behaviors and to convince our legislators to put the proper ordinances or laws and fines and education in place where we're not literally killing ourselves. Our children deserve the fight that we have for this. They deserve to have the ability to breathe. And right now, every day, we are losing the ability to breathe in our Chester community. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us your testimony. It's very powerful, and we're really glad that we will get to submit this to the New York City Council with your really good recommendations. So thank you so much. And you're welcome
Thank
to
you.
stay here as long as you like.
Thank you.
Is Isaac on this call? Isaac Carmignani?
Yeah, I'm here, Susan.
Isaac, are you ready to give your testimony?
I'm gonna pass at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Is there anyone on the call who would like to testify who is not signed up or registered to testify? Okay, then I am going to read a testimony that was provided to us by Eileen Leonard. My name is Eileen Leonard and I live in Washington Heights. I am a member of 350 NYC's Waste Not Subcommittee. In reading the Solid Waste Management Plan draft, I was particularly interested in how the Department of Sanitation supports the reduction of waste. The streets of my neighborhood are awash in trash, and I'm saddened whenever I see trash floating in the river. In the next 20 years, New York State's landfills are scheduled to reach their limit, and alternate sites will have to be found. One answer to this problem, and a significant one, is to reduce the amount of waste created. The draft plan talks a number of times about the importance of extended producer responsibility legislation, requiring manufacturers to contribute to the disposal costs of their products and packaging while creating incentives for them to choose recyclable material and reduce quantity. Right now, there is a significant EPR piece of legislation in Albany that is facing pushback from lobbyists of big companies and the American Chemistry Council. New York City's Department of Sanitation must use its influence to pass the bill into law. Called the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, or PRRIA, the bill requires manufacturers to reduce their packaging, which will save the city money and drive the transition to a circular economy that the plan draft says it's aiming for. The draft plan also talks about monitoring New York State's 1982 Returnable Container Act, referred to as the Bottle Bill. More than monitoring, I urge the Sanitation Department to really push for the modernization of this bill, which expands the types of containers eligible for redemption and increases the redemption rate to 10 cents a container. These changes would help reduce the amount that the Sanitation Department needs to collect, create green jobs, and clean our streets. The draft plan noted the current redemption system's effectiveness when it said that in 2020, redemption resulted in the recovery of 5.5 billion containers, over 240,000 tons of material across New York State. Expanding the system will mean more containers are recovered rather than going to landfills or into waterways. Diverting waste from landfills and incinerators is an environmental justice issue, since many are sited in low-income or marginalized neighborhoods. Furthermore, in light of our government's current focus on tariffs, reuse of material can prove to be an economically viable alternative to disposal, as less raw materials will be needed. Thank you. Okay. It looks like we are waiting for some people who are scheduled to testify during this hour between 5 and 6, but none of them are here right now. And so what I would recommend is that we take a 10-minute break and come back at 5:30. Okay?
I can start.
Okay, so Andrea, could you please give us your testimony?
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, uh, uh, Members of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board. My name is Andrea Scarborough. I am a former president of my Civic, Addesleigh Park Civic Organization, a board member of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, a board member of Anthropocene Alliance, and a board member of Southeast Queens Residents Environmental Justice Coalition. Today, I come before you speaking as a concerned resident of the Jamaica Queens community I live in close proximity to the waste transfer stations that reside in the Liberty Avenue area. New York City zoning mandates that industrial facilities must be fully enclosed when they are near residential areas. In my area where the waste transfer stations exist, the area is currently zoned as M1, which allows for light manufacturing, but also requires that all business activities, in my case, manufacturing or industrial, be fully enclosed. The rules exist to separate manufacturing activities from residences to prevent hazards like fire, explosions, and toxic matter, and to reduce nuisances such as noise, smoke, and foul odors. The New York City regulation mandate an enclosed building requirement of all putrescible and non-putrescible waste at transfer facilities. While New York City rule states the area for all activities relating to the receipt, tipping, sorting, processing, compaction, and storage of solid waste shall be wholly within a fully enclosed structure, the New York State regulations differ and only specifies all processing activities as it relates to putrescible waste must be conducted in an enclosed building. New York State DC allows an exception for non-putrescible waste, which may be stored in an outdoor area if it is stored in closed containers or covered trailers. Although New York State DC offers this exception, and in most instances, the state has rule over the city, in this particular case, in New York State, municipal laws on construction and demolition waste takes precedence over less restrictive state regulations. At present, in my community of Southeast Queens, the waste transfer stations on Liberty Avenue are not fully enclosed. The area for putrescible waste is fully enclosed, but the area that houses the construction and demolition is open. With the more stringent New York City laws not enforced, it subjects the residents that live nearby those facilities to increased hazardous conditions and pollutants, resulting in adverse health conditions. The laws need to be enforced and proper oversight conducted by the municipality, in particular, in this case, the New York City Department of Sanitation. The facilities are 400 feet away from a park with a tennis court, a basketball court, where seniors walk the track and our kids play. The facilities are also surrounded by 1- and 2-family homes. Switching concerns. Another concern is the commercial waste zone reform plan established by Local Law 199 of 2019, which requires scrutiny, as certain areas of the industry was overlooked. I am concerned as to the rules and regulations, as well as oversight that will impact the haulers, but not the waste facility station owners. In my community, I have haulers as well as waste facility owners who are not haulers, but they accept waste from the myriad of third-party independent truckers that exist.
While the CWZ legislation clearly addresses haulers, it is unclear if any consideration was given to the non-haul facility owners who are allowed to continue to accept waste from everyone, anywhere, including any independent trucker and the public. It is unclear if any zone requirements that exist for haulers, commercial waste zone requirements that exist for haulers, if that exists for those third-party truckers that do business at those waste stations, and to the waste facility owners. What are the rules and regulations of those non-haul transfer stations under the commercial waste zone legislation? On visiting one of the waste stations in our area, I was informed they are not included in the CWZ law as they are not haulers. My concern is, if this is true, then does that mean that any independent truck from anywhere can just continue to conduct their business with no regard for the newly implemented zoning laws put in place to reduce traffic and emissions and pollutants that exist in environmentally overburdened areas? So it sounds like business as usual. In closing, I ask that QSWAB please take into consideration the existing New York State and New York City rules and regulations as it pertains to the enclosure of waste facilities near residential areas, and recommend stricter enforcement and oversight of those regulations by the municipality. I also ask that QSWAB highlight the flaws that currently exist in the commercial waste zone reform plan, as non-haulers are not subject to any oversight under the plan. Environmentally overburdened communities, such as mine, deserve no less. Thank you for your time.
Andrea, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And hello to everybody who was just joined. Does anyone else here have testimony that they would like to share at this time? Okay, then I am going to pause our recording. Okay. So for those who are just joining us, I'm Susan Latham. I'm the chair of the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, and I want to welcome and thank you for joining us today at the Queens SWAB hearing on the 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan. The New York City Department of Sanitation released its draft 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan on October 1st, which provides the roadmap for how the Department of Sanitation will manage New York City's trash over the next 10 years. There is a mandatory period for public comment and feedback, which is the public's opportunity to weigh in on New York City's plan. However, the Department of Sanitation has provided only a 45-day review period, which is the minimum allowable under current guidelines, and does not really provide sufficient time to do the public outreach and education needed to inform the public about the plan and its impacts, and to collect public testimony and feedback. This means that all public comments must be submitted to the Department of Sanitation by November 17th. The testimony that has been presented today and will be presented during the next half hour will be submitted to the Department of Sanitation. It will also be used to help the Queens SWAB and its partner SWABs in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Manhattan develop consolidated, unified testimony that will be presented to the New York City Council at its hearing, which we expect to be on November 13th. Today's hearing is an opportunity for the people of Queens to have public input into the plan. We look forward to hearing your thoughts about trash in Queens, its environmental impacts in your community, and what your suggestions are for concrete actions that the city can take to reduce waste, increase diversion from landfill and incineration, and deal with our trash in an environmentally sound and just way. We have already heard from various stakeholders, and we have a couple of people here who have registered to testify, but I want to welcome you to testify if you haven't registered. I can put the registration link back in the chat, but you should feel free to raise your hand when I ask if there's anyone here who is interested in testifying. And we ask that you limit your testimony to about 5 minutes. And at the end of your testimony, if you haven't already done so, can you please address any potential solutions or specific actions that you would like the city to include in the solid waste management plan that you think would help address the issues that you've described in your testimony? So with that, Rachana Shah, you had registered to testify. Are you ready to testify?
Hi there. If someone else is ready, I'd love to go second or third, but if not, I can do so.
Okay. Is there anyone else here who has testimony that they would like to read or share? So Rachana, I guess it's you.
Okay. 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 Just give me a moment. All right.
I will just share while Rachana pulls her notes together that we started at 4 o'clock. We were pretty much constant testimony until about 5:20. We've taken a couple of breaks. And a lot of the people who are here now have been with us since earlier in the day and have already testified.
I see.
And if I have not said so already, this remaining portion of the hearing takes the place of Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board's usual monthly meeting. This hearing will end at 7 o'clock. And then at that point, if the Queens SWAB has any information that we want to share, then we can do that at 7 o'clock. So that's just a little clarity on what's happened already for the last couple of hours. So Rachana, you may feel like you're first, but you're not first.
Got it. No, that's actually very helpful. Okay. Okay. So is it all right if I'm not on video, or would you rather me be on video?
Totally fine. We're recording everything just so everyone is aware. And then all the testimony, if you have not provided written testimony, all of your testimony is being recorded so that we can provide all of this to the Department of Sanitation and then use the ideas and the issues that you raise in our consolidated testimony for the New York City Council hearing.
Okay. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Rachana Shah, and I am one of the leaders of Beyond Plastics Queens, the Queens chapter of the national organization. I am a zero waste consultant and educator by profession. I'm a true certified leader, and I'm a mom of 2 kids in the New York City public school system. In 2015, New York City's One NYC plan addressed the city's zero waste goals, sending zero waste to landfills and reducing waste disposal by 90% by 2030, reducing the city's greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050, and ensuring that New York City has the best air and water quality among all large U.S. cities by 2030. It was with those strong goals that were declared and affirmed by the city, and which started to take hold in action. With that knowledge, I brought my knowledge and my master's degree in sustainability to the city, and decided to stay here and work here as a zero waste consultant and educator. In 2018, I started with zero waste schools. Then in 2021, I shifted once the city's regulations and enforcements around food waste were, like I said, enforced. It enabled me to work with businesses and corporate offices to initiate zero waste programs and support the behavior change needed to comply with the programs. And next, I look to make systemic change by serving as either an expert or providing advocacy for both city and state laws around waste reduction, plastic reduction, and such. So I'm here today because not only am I passionate about this topic, but I work in it, and I've seen firsthand that when the city commits to these goals, it brings a lot of enthusiasm and talent to the city. And I've also seen from my firsthand experience in doing lots of waste audits for very large corporations, as I come face to face with trash on a weekly basis, that you know there is so much that can be salvaged and repurposed, and there's just so much waste that doesn't need to be there. And the city can really help foster those initiatives and programs because the willingness is there. In many of the corporate clients, the nonprofits at the school, the willingness is often there, but sometimes the supports are not. And that is one really key factor in my testimony today. I also work a lot with addressing environmental justice to large audiences across the country. And it's really astounding to me that we are very disconnected as citizens from our waste. And people are often very shocked and alarmed to know how much fossil fuels and how much energy it takes to just process our waste and ship it to other places where the negative effects of that waste is felt by other communities, both globally but also locally, and here in New York with, for example, the Brookhaven landfill. And so I just think this is one of the best and lowest hanging fruit in terms of working with citizens to really make a remarkable difference on our climate and climate impact through just, if you look at the spend from the city, spending on education, outreach, different bins and infrastructure that would help, all of that stuff is relatively very inexpensive compared to large technological solutions that are more out of reach. And so really what we need is supports. We need the city to stick to these strong goals and continue them even further. And if we have missed these goals or are on track to miss these goals by 2030, I say we just reaffirm them and push the goalpost a little bit further rather than scrap the program. Because like I said, there is an entire world of people in this city that are really dedicated, either whether it's through the Master Composter program, through Fab Scrap, Material for the Arts, and all the different programs that the city already has. There are folks very, very invested in these touch points that they can make a concrete difference and a direct impact to lower climate change. And so I believe the city should really support what is already there and strengthen it further, and also very importantly, to guarantee funding for things like these medium-sized decentralized compost centers, so that they can not feel like that funding will just go away at any moment. It's really important that they have that, because I saw what happened when a lot of those compost centers lost funding is they lost people. And I know those people personally, so not only is this a climate change issue, but this affects our citizenry directly. So I'll end there because I think I'm at time.
Thank you so much. Rachana, am I saying it correctly?
Yes.
Rachana. Please correct me.
Oh, it's Rachana. Yeah, but you're close
Rachana.
enough.
Okay, Rachana.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else on this call? Any QSWAB members who would like to testify?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Darryl. If you don't mind, I'd like to say something. Okay,
Please.
I'm Darryl Wesby. I'm the Community Board 10 representative on QSWAB. I've been on here for a while, and I've had a suggestion that I've made before, but it seems that for some reason it hasn't gotten much traction. One of the issues we have is the amount of organic material going into landfills. And a lot of that, I believe it was 15% of it in Queens, is yard waste. And for the last year and a half or so, I had a proposal that all they had to do was require that if you walk anywhere in Queens, you see neighborhoods where the contractors are doing all the yards, they're cutting the grass and so on. If they were required to use clear bags instead of the black bags that they use, the clear bags would be going to the compost pile as opposed to the black bags they use that all go to landfills, especially this time of year as they are collecting the leaves. They're putting the leaves in those 45-gallon, those big black 45-gallon bags, and that's just organic material going into landfills. If they were required to use the clear bags, they would then when they get put out every week, they would be going to
Darryl? Darryl, I think we lost you. Am I frozen? Can anyone hear
No,
me?
you're not.
No.
I think we lost
No,
Darryl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good,
Fine.
Susan.
We
Okay,
hear
thank
you.
Okay.
Darryl,
All right. And Darryl, if you can hear this, thank you for your testimony. We will definitely include that in the testimony that gets submitted to the Department of Sanitation. All right. This is the last call for anyone who would like to provide testimony. Then I think that we are going to close the hearing 15 minutes early. So I want to thank everyone who has testified today. I want to thank you for your ideas. I want to thank you for your passion. As I said, we will be compiling all of the testimony, both written testimony that was submitted as well as oral testimony that was given today, into one comprehensive document that will be submitted to the New York City Department of Sanitation. And we will also be working with our SWAB partners in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan on developing comprehensive testimony that pulls out the common comments from all of the different SWAB hearings that are happening to develop one unified piece of testimony that will be presented to the New York City Council. Mary, if you would like to, you have a comment?
After you close the hearing, I'd just like to ask Paul from DEC a question if he would entertain that.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is again, I want to thank everybody, and I'm going to close the hearing and stop the recording. Thank you.